Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I am doing the end of the year book tag plus some other questions. Last year when I did the end of the year book tag, I added some of the questions from the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag because I thought it would be fun to answer some of those questions for the second half of the year. And I liked how that turned out, so I thought I would do it again this year. So this is going to be a mashup of the end of the year book tag and the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. I'll link the originals for both of those down below. Let's just get started, and first I'm going to start with the questions from the end of the year book tag. The first question is, are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? So this year I actually have more unfinished books than I usually do, or books that I started and then decided that I wasn't in the mood for anymore, and so I put them down. I do have two that I want to either finish or at least make a decision on, either finish them or DNF them. So the first one that I have is a very popular one on Booktube, which is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. I started this months ago. I don't even remember when, but I started this like over the summer, and I got 100 pages into it and I just couldn't keep going. The reason I read this, because what I've always heard about it is that it has these characters that you just adore and that they have this like great friendship, and 100 pages into it, I was just like, where are these amazing characters and relationships? Like, where is this? So I just kind of put it down, and then since putting it down, I have heard actually a couple of people say that it has a rough start, that the first 100 to 150 pages are not that great, and it takes a while to get into the story and especially into the characters. So that is, I guess, encouraging, because that means that I haven't reached like the good part yet. So yeah, I really want to give this one another try before the end of the year, push past the 150 page mark and see if I can get to the point where it's supposed to like get good. The other book that I want to make a decision on by the end of the year is The Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett. This one I also started quite a few months ago, and I got about 40 pages into it apparently. And I don't know why I can't get into this one. I think part of it is the writing style. It has a more old-fashioned style of writing, and it's kind of going, like, it starts with just like exposition of telling you about like historical events that I am not particularly interested in. And I have tried to read this so many times. I tried to read it physically at least twice, maybe more, and then I tried to listen to the audiobook also twice. And like, I feel like I have given this book so many chances because I so want to love it, and I can't get past 40 pages. I feel like it's gonna have to end up being a DNF, but I really don't want it to be. But yeah, so these are the two that I am thinking I want to read or DNF, or just make some kind of decision by the end of the year. I feel like this one has a good chance of me finishing it and liking it if I can get past the slow part at the beginning, and this one has like a 90% chance of being a DNF, but I'm gonna try and give both of these another shot. Question 2 is, do you have an autumnal book to transition into the end of the year? So usually I'm not a big seasonal reader. I don't tend to associate certain books or genres with certain times of the year. I kind of just read whatever, whenever I want. This year I did try doing a kind of seasonal reading for October, reading some autumnal spooky books in October. It had some very mixed results. I don't think that seasonal reading is really for me. But one book that I did read this fall that felt like I had to read it a specific time of year was The Forgotten Kingdom by Signe Pike. This is the second book in the Lost Queen trilogy, which is a historical fiction series set in medieval Scotland. And it has like druids, and it feels very magical, and there's lots of like nature and running around in the woods and like all of this. So I read the first book, which is The Lost Queen, last year in September. I very clearly have this like feeling, like a memory and a feeling of reading the first book in this trilogy, specifically in September when the weather felt a certain way, when like there was a certain feeling in the air. And so when September hit and there was a day when like the weather flipped and it suddenly felt like fall, I was like, I need to read this book. And so I started reading The Forgotten Kingdom in September because it just felt like it's a book that had to be read in September. So this is probably the closest thing that I have to that, less because of seasonal reading, more just because of very strong like association between when I read the first book in the series. Question 3 is there a new release you're still waiting for? And yes, as of filming this video, I have 2 releases that I am still waiting for this year. The first one is The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. It's coming out November 12th, maybe. So I'm not sure if this video is going up before or after the release date, but as of filming, I'm still waiting for The Betrayals, and then I also am still waiting for A Sky Beyond the Storm, I think is the title, by Sabaa Tahir, which is the 4th book in the Ember in the Ashes series. Question 4 is, what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? So other than those 2 releases that I just mentioned, because I am planning to read them like almost immediately upon getting them, I have at least 2 books that I'm fairly certain I want to read before the end of the year. So one book that I definitely want to read before the end of the year is Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. This is the 3rd book in the Tawny Man trilogy. I want to finish this trilogy because it has taken me a very long time. Another one that I want to finish by the end of the year is A Dance with Fate by Juliet Marillier. This is the 2nd book in her Warrior Bards trilogy. This came out earlier this year, and I feel like I've been putting off reading it because sometimes like the books that I'm most excited for, I kind of put off reading them, and I feel like that's what happened with this one. Question 5 is there a book you think could still shock you and become your favorite book of the year? One that I think would be both like shocking and predictable in a way would be The Lies of Locke Lamora, because like I was expecting to love it, and if I can get to the part where the characters really start to shine through and I love the characters, then I think it could become a favorite. But also it would be kind of shocking because I like almost DNF'd this book and I just have disliked the first 100 pages so much. So it kind of would be both predictable and shocking if this one became a favorite. And question 6 is, have you already started making reading plans for next year? So yes, I definitely have. I've made my winter TBR, which will include January and February. So that's some plans that are going into the next year. I'll usually make TBRs maybe like 3 months out. So I already have some that are for January and February, and then I also, you know, have been making my list of most anticipated releases for next year, and a lot of those books will translate into my TBR for that year as those books are released. So I definitely have reading plans. I don't have a lot of grand plans for like the entire year, but I definitely have plans for like the first few months. Alright, so that is it for the questions that are from the end of the year book tag, and now I'm just going to move into a couple of the questions that I pulled from the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag that are just modified for the end of the year or the second half of the year. So the first question is, what is the best book that you read in the second half of the year? The one I'm going to go with, just because I loved this book and I want to talk about it, is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is a contemporary YA fantasy that we're following Yadriel, who is from a family of Brujex, and he is a trans boy who wants to prove that he can use his Brujo powers, and he accidentally summons the wrong ghost and ends up maybe falling for that ghost. It's such a cute story. I had such a fun time reading this book. Next question is, what is the best sequel that you read in the second half of the year? And for this, I'm gonna go with A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in the An Ember in the Ashes series. And since reading this, I have found out that apparently a lot of people don't like the second book as much as the first book, which like I actually really loved the second book more than the first book. I liked the first book too, but I definitely enjoyed the second book more, which upon watching some other people's reviews, was actually very surprising to me because it didn't even like register in my brain that a lot of this story is just them traveling, and usually I hate traveling stories, and for some reason I just loved this one. The next question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. And of course for this I could say A Dance with Fate by Juliet Marillier because this is a 2020 release that I haven't read yet but I want to. But for the sake of having variety in this video, I'm gonna also say Alatsue by Darcy Littlebadger that I just recently got, and I'm very excited to read this. And the next question is, what book was the biggest disappointment in the second half of the year? And I'm gonna go with The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. I was really hoping to love this because it is a book about books and I've heard really amazing things about it, and also a friend of mine recommended it to me, and so I don't know, I really wanted to love it and I just really did not. And I realized I think there are some things that were just like stylistic choices that the author made that really didn't work for me, and I think there are also just some genre things because I've heard this described as like a gothic inspired story, and after looking up what that means I was like, oh yeah, that is not a vibe that I'm super into. So I don't think I really like gothic stories, so like this just really missed the mark for me and my taste in books. And the next question is, what book was the biggest surprise in the second half of the year? So for biggest surprise, I'm gonna go with An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. This of course is the second book, A Torch Against the Night, but I lent somebody the first book, so we're just holding this up in its place. But really both of these, An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night, were big surprises for me because it's a series that I have heard a lot of people love and rave about, but I never really understood what the story was or what the vibe was, or like I didn't really have a feeling for what it was, and so I almost unhauled these books many times because I really had no idea if I was even interested in them. I had just gotten them like based on the hype a while ago. And then I just decided to give them a try, and it was a huge surprise. I ended up loving them, and now I'm like very invested in this series. So yeah, the An Ember in the Ashes and A Torch Against the Night were definitely my biggest pleasant surprise. The next question is, what is a book that made you happy? So this is another one that I could do a repeat because I could say Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, because this one just like very like warmed my heart. I loved it. But again, for the sake of variety, I'm gonna say Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones because I also just really adored this one. It was so cute, and what I loved about it was that it felt so nostalgic to read it. I've never read this book before, so it wasn't actually nostalgic, but there is something about the storytelling and like the style of storytelling to it that it felt like something I would have read as a kid and I would have loved. And so like it's such a cute story that I enjoyed so much, but it also just gave me this very like warm nostalgic feeling from a brand new book, or at least brand new to me. And the last question is, what is the most beautiful book that you have bought in the second half of the year? So there could be a lot of answers to this question because there are a lot of really beautiful books that I ended up getting in the second half of the year. But one that I'm going to pick for this is The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. I got this one just recently and it's just so beautiful. I love the gold and the red and just the like foiling on it, but also like it's beautiful on the cover, but I also love the artwork on the inside. So the book is just absolutely beautiful inside and out, and I love the artwork throughout this. So I think this is definitely one of the most beautiful books that I got in the second half of the year. All right, so that was the last of the questions that I pulled from the Mid-Year Book Freakout tag. So that is the end of this like mashup of these two tag videos. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!